Hello, Queensland Storyteller Time. I'm Kim Dodsworth. Today, a story of great charm by long-time contributor Jessie Bate of South Australia. The Interview. Though autumn had begun, the landscape in that arid region showed no signs of renewal yet. Heat beat down on the sea of grey scrub, the rocky earth, with only scrawny eucalypts, spinifex, and the dull foliage of cotton bush to break the monotony. The distant hills of the Flinders Ranges, dark and largely unrelieved, gave no rest to the eye. As he drove towards the homestead, Philip Crombie glanced without pleasure over the harsh terrain. One day, if he stayed long enough, he might learn to love this place, but at present he would have given much to be driving through the lush and variegated hills and fields of his native Mount Gambier. Philip Crombie was a friendly, intelligent young man. His upbringing, by loving parents with a Methodist background, had given him a sensitive conscience and a kind heart. Thus ill-equipped, he proposed to fight his way into the world of sharp, investigative journalism, ultimately hoping to aspire to the heights of a yarn event, for example. A recommendation from the editor of his local paper to an editor friend in Hawker had led him to this harsh outback region, hopefully the first small step on his upward surge. He was on his way to interview Hannah and Jan Vandermeer, who were about to celebrate their 70th wedding anniversary. The old homestead, when he reached it, was an untidy sprawl of mongrel sections and dilapidated outhouses. Inside it was better. There was a solidity and balance about the main room, with its ancient furniture and faded pictures. Jan Vandermeer was asleep in an armchair. "He was tending a sick cow at first light," his wife explained. Philip, asking the expected questions and noting her answers, eyed her intently as he talked and wrote. Jan might have been any old Australian farmer, weathered, hard-bitten. Even in sleep, the features of his face did not soften. But Hannah Vandermeer was different. At 87, she was certainly not youthful-looking. She didn't have the soft, crumpled, tissue-paper prettiness of some of the old women he had known. But her long face was full of energy and humour, and the eyes, of a strong slate blue, were fierce and challenging. She answered the questions directly. 8 children, and Sam, of course, who was taken from us as a babe when the scarlet fever came. 24 grandchildren, scattered throughout Australia. 56, or was it 57, great-grandchildren, and 2 great-greats, still babies. She indicated with pride the family photo on the piano. Philip picked up the huge photo. What a horde of people! The old couple were, of course, in the centre, contented smiles on their faces. Then there came the next generation, the sturdy, ageing sons and daughters and their partners. Then, in a wider ring, the grandchildren and other descendants, with the 2 little babies. Philip, himself an only child, felt a pang of envy. They looked so united, so fond of each other, not sentimental, but with an obvious warmth and mutual respect. "My 80th birthday that was. They came from all over. My, that was a day. I like a party." Jan, she told him, did what he could on the land, but grandson Michael and his son Craig lived in the annex and ran the farm. Jan, she told him, did what he could on the land, but grandson Michael and his son Craig lived in the annex and ran the farm. Wouldn't Jan retire? Philip asked her. She laughed. "Farmers don't retire. They just slow down a bit." Philip's liking for her grew. Her memory was sharp, but only for the things that impinged. The years of disease, of flood and fire and drought. Seeing the first combine harvester, the coming of electricity to the region, and later, television. Her eyes shone. "I do like that telly. Mind you, there's rubbish." But national and world events awoke scant response. The Cold War, the moon landings, the coming of computers, they meant little to her. From time to time Jan stirred. contributed a few words, then slept again. At last Philip closed his notebook with some regret. "Mrs. Vandermeer, it's been a real pleasure meeting you. It's good to know that marriage can last. I mean, to have loved someone, stayed with him for 70 years. That's really something." Her head turned swiftly. "Who said anything about love?" "But you stayed with him. That must mean—" There was silence for a second or two. Then Hannah said, "It was an arranged marriage. I was 17. He was shocked. "You mean you had no choice?" "Oh, I suppose I had a choice. But those days you did what your parents thought best. Jan's parents, this was their farm, they were killed in their old car on the railway line. It stuck and the train came. Jan was 19, an only child. He had a farm to run. My parents and his, they were all migrants from Holland. They were good friends. He had to have a wife. A farmer must have a wife. So the folks said we should get married, and we did. But you didn't mind? It wasn't any use minding. It was the right thing to do. Jan, he's not bad. He likes his own way, but he's been a good husband. Only now I've had enough. I'm staying for the party. I like a party. Then I'm off. I'm leaving him." His shock deepened. "But where will you go? To one of the family?" "Not likely. They'd send me back. No, I'll go. Somewhere different. Somewhere new." "But your husband, your family, they'll be so hurt." "I've thought of my family for 70 years. Now it's time to think of myself." Philip wasn't sure afterwards how he concluded the interview, but at last he stood to his feet and made for the door. "Philip," he turned back. "Philip, you're not to say anything about that. It's just between you and me." She looked flushed and frightened. About my plans, I mean." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He drove away. As he calmed down, he thought, "Say nothing. Doesn't she realize she's talking to a reporter? Why, this'll make a great story. The arranged marriage, the long years of drudgery, of obedience to a demanding husband, and at last, at 87, rebellion. Great, I can do it. I wish I could see the faces of them all when it comes out." Then he did picture them, that huge collection of friendly, decent folk, and he knew he couldn't do it. He wrote up the story of Hannah and Jan. It was tender, humorous, full of admiration. It was a good, well-written piece, and he was pleased with it. It also, though he didn't see it, make it clear that Jan Avent or any other investigative journalist had nothing to worry about where he was concerned. But as soon as Philip drove off, Hannah clapped her hand to her burning cheeks. What had got into her? She had always been straight down the line. What had made her talk so shockingly to that young reporter? But she felt also a tingle of pleasure and excitement. It had been something new. She looked over at the sleeping Jan, a look not without affection. Of course she was not going to leave him. Where would she go? But leading that young man a dance, she'd enjoyed that. She'd been with Jan for 70 years. She'd hardly go now, but still she did sometimes wish for a change, something different. She laughed suddenly, and Jan woke up. Oh, has he gone then? I'm parched, Hannah. Make us a cup of tea." Out of long habit she rose in obedience, and then sank back again. "I'm tired, Jan. You make it." His jaw dropped. "Me?" She laughed, meeting his eyes with a sparkle in her own. "Why not? You can make tea, can't you?" He looked at her thoughtfully. "You're pretty sparky today. You sound like you used to as a young woman, years back. You were pretty sparky then." "Was I? I'll say. Remember fighting me over the new carpet for the room? And the trip to Adelaide you were so keen on? And then getting the new stove? And the dratted television? My, that was an up and downer. She had forgotten. Yes, she used to stand up to Jan, until the problems of her growing brood of children sapped her strength and made agreeing with him, doing everything as he wanted it, easier than fighting. "Things change," she said wistfully, "but they can change again." "They can," he agreed, "only not too much." He got up, put his hand on her head, and looked at her with unusual tenderness. "I'll go make the tea," he said.
Do you love me?
I'm your wife.
I know. But do you love me?
Do I love him?
Well,
For 25 years I've lived with him, fought with him, starved with him. 25 years my bed is his. If that's not love, what is?
and you love me.
I suppose I do.
And I suppose I love you too. It doesn't change a thing, but even so, after 25 years, it's nice to